Hey everybody, in this video we are going to be covering the review problems for Module 5. Module 5 was all about graphing equations, graphing lines, and using slope. So in this video we're going to be covering numbers 7 through 16 in your review packet. So the first four problems here ask the same thing, which is find the slope. Find the slope. And in these examples, you're given two coordinates. When you want to find the slope, there's two ways of approaching it. You can either take a visual approach and sketch the XY coordinates and then plot these 2 points and see what the rise over run is, or determine how far up or down you have to go and then over. That's one way to determine the slope. The other way is to use the slope formula. So I'll work out number 7 in both ways, and then after that you can choose which way. So if you like to approach these questions visually, the best way visually is to start by sketching your X and Y axis. And we've used grids in the past, but you don't necessarily need to draw out a grid. You just need to draw marks that help you plot these points right here. So the first point is 2, -7. And remember that the first number is always X and the second number is always Y. So that means we're going to be lined up at 2 on the X-axis. There's 1, 2. And we're going to be lined up at -7 on the Y-axis. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you only need to draw as many marks really as you need. So there's 2, -7. It lines up with 2 on the x-axis, and it lines up with -7 on the y-axis, xy. Then you got 8, 5. So 8 would be lined up with the x-axis, and 5 would be lined up with the y-axis. So we've already drawn 2 marks, so I'm going to draw a few more to get to 8. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And now on the y-axis, it's +5, so we need to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 upwards. So there's 8, 5. Now visually, to determine the slope, we need to figure out how steep that line is that connects them. So the best way to do that would be to start with your left point, which is right here, and we're going to go up until we get to the level of where the other point is. And we need to determine how far up did we go. So if I was at -7 at the bottom level here and I go up to 5, right, you can look at these marks. Well, in total, to go from -7 up to +5, that's a total of 12 units to get from the bottom up here to this level. So I'm going to write that this was up 12. And then we go over. And we determine how far over did we go from where we left off. So we went from 2 to 8. So this would be right 6. So we went up 12, right 6. The way we write this for slope is we would kind of write it like fraction, up 12, right 6. So this would be 12 over 6 or 2. There's your slope. That's a slope of 2. So if you like to visually approach it, that's how you would do it. If you like to use the formula, you'll also get the same answer. So it really depends on what you like. So for the formula, you would have to have this formula memorized. So it would be y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Not too difficult of a formula to memorize. You just have to remember which numbers go where. So there's x1 y1, x2, y2. So the ones and the twos just have to do with which point it is in order. So the first point has the ones, the second point has the twos. And now you just place those four numbers in the right spots here. So across the top, we would be doing 5 and -7. And since there's already a minus there, we would be doing 5 minus -7. Since this 7 already has a negative in it, there needs to be a minus a -7 there. So that -7 belongs to that 7 right there. And then x2 minus x1, 8 minus 2, 8 minus 2. And so now all we have to do is just kind of simplify, subtract, and simplify these. So when we do 5 minus -7 across the top, that's like 5 plus 7, or 12. Then put equals 12 over, and then 8 minus 2 is 6. 12 over 6, which is 2. And you'll recognize those numbers. 12 over 6, that's what we got over here. Up 12, right 6. That's what these numbers are doing, is determining how far up or down, and then how far to the right. There you go. So 2 ways to approach it, visually or with the formula. So for 8, 9, and 10, you should do the same thing. I won't work those in this video. You should practice those and then compare with the key later on. But you can practice them visually or using the formula or both just to kind of check your answer. Let's move on to the next set of problems. So number 11. On number 11, it asks us to list some points that are on the line, and it gives us negative 3x plus y equals -6. So one way to approach this would be to turn this formula, or turn this equation, into the slope intercept form, or y equals mx plus b. Right now, x and y are on the same side, so we want them to be on separate sides. So we would need to take this x term and move it over. So when we do, we would add 3x to both sides, which would turn this into y equals 3x minus 6. Now we can take 3 points on the line, and it could be any x values, and we want to figure out what their y values are. So usually we could start at like 0, for example, like 0, 1, and 2. So if we start at 0, we'd put a 0 here and determine what's the y value, for example. So we would say y equals 3 times 0 minus 6. Well, that's 0 minus 6, or -6. So there's the value for 0. So there's 1 point. We need to list 2 more. We could take the next one and do y equals 3 times 1 minus 6. Well, that's 3 minus 6, or -3. So there's -3. And the last one we could do 3 times 2 minus 6. So I just did 0. I picked 0, 1, and 2 just because they go in order, but you could pick any points. Right, this is 6 minus 6, or 0. So there's 0. Right, so you could do this with any 3 x values. You could have picked other numbers right here and just replace them into the equation and then simplify. But you kind of notice a pattern here. So if you picked other points, you could probably determine the pattern and figure those out as well. On the exam, since it'll be multiple choice, you'll see the points that are in the answer choices, and you'll be able to check them and plug them in and determine which one is on the line. Number 12 says, write the equation of the line that has a slope of 1/2 and passes through the point of 0, -4. So I think the best way to approach this one is visually. So visually, we see a couple of things. We see this point right here, 0, -4. So 0, -4 is right there, and that's also called the y-intercept because it's on the y-axis. There's x, there's y, 0, -4. Well, that tells us that our b value is -4. And what I mean by the b value, I mean by this equation here, y equals mx plus b. So when we write this out, y equals, we would put our slope where the 1/2, or where the m was, 1/2. We'd leave the x as is, and then we'd have -4. 1/2 x minus 4. So to kind of connect all these things, this -4, that's the same thing as that. And that's what that value is right there. That helps you write the equation, and then the slope, it tells it to you right there. There it is. So there is what your answer should look like, y equals 1/2 x minus 4. Number 13 says, what quadrant is this point in? We talked about quadrants. So just drawing our xy axis again. Quadrant 1 is in the top right, then quadrant 2 going counterclockwise all the way around. So quadrant 1, 2, 3, and 4 in that order, going counterclockwise. So now we just need to know, where is this coordinate here, -5, 1. Well, -5, 1 is this way, -5 and then 1 up. So there it is. -5, 1 is somewhere right there. So it's going to be in quadrant 2. In general, quadrant 1 is always and positive, positive x, positive y. Here it would be negative and positive. Quadrant 3 is negative, negative, and quadrant 4 is positive and then a negative. And that's referring to the x and the y values. Number 14 wants us to identify a couple of points in this diagram. So it says point A and point H. So point A is right there, and it looks like the x value that it's lined up at is -2, and the y value that it's lined up at on the y-axis is +4, -2, 4. So there's point A, and then point H is down here. So it looks like it's lined up at -1 and -3 for point H. Number 15 and 16 ask to find the slope of these particular equations. It's easy to find the slope if our equation looks like this. If it looks like that, we need the slope is m. But if it looks like this, then we're not sure what the slope is because we need it to be y equals first. So to do that, we would solve this equation for y. So we can do that by solving for y. We'd subtract 3x from both sides, which would leave us with -4y equals -3x plus 22. And then we would divide both sides, or everything on both sides, by -4. So y equals, and we take it one fraction at a time, -3 divided by -4, that turns into +3/4, the x stays. And then we would do minus, since 22 is positive and 4 is negative. In this case, 22 divided by 4 gives us a decimal. And so in some cases, we would leave it as a fraction. In other cases, we could write it as a decimal, 5.5. So in some cases, you might see it like this: y equals 3/4 x minus 5.5. But most of the time, it'll probably look like that right there. It just depends on your answer choices, but both of these are valid answers. Just depends on what you see. In either case, though, they are equivalent. And then the last one here, same type of problem. Um, sorry, let me rewind. On 15, we were just asked for the slope, actually. So I kind of talked about this when I didn't need to, but in case it asks what's the equation, you would end up with either of these two. But if you're just asked about the slope, it's asking for that value in front of the x there. So the slope here is just 3/4. Slope equals 3/4. There you go. So really that other fraction didn't matter. So on 16, same idea. We're just finding the slope. So let's turn this equation into the y equals mx plus b form. So we get 8y equals 5x plus 24. That canceled. And we divide everything by 8. Really, I don't need to do the entire problem, but just to be thorough, 5/8, there's our slope. You could technically stop there and say that's your slope, but just to be thorough, 24 divided by 8 is 3. This is your equation, but your slope here is just that fraction or the number. It doesn't always have to be a fraction, but in this case it is 5/8, which is in front of the x. That's your slope. Right, so this covered number 7 through 16, all the questions from Module 5. If you have questions about anything, feel free to reach out. In the next video, we'll be talking about Module 6.